You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host Kevin. Alex is not going to be joining us tonight. He was a traveling man, so to speak, here this last week, and was still traveling tonight. But Kevin and I are holding down the fort, and we're going to rock it out. Kevin, how we doing?
I'm doing good, man. You're playing musical co-hosts here the last few weeks between Alex's travel schedules and mine. So,
right.
I'm glad it's Tuesday night, right? Get to do a little rookie breakdown, if you will. Being able to start this process and start diving in with people who are going to be, kind of this next wave of NFL athlete and what they're going to bring to the table here. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be good. Should be a lot of fun, right? Like, this is where we start really kind of diving into some of these players and really looking at that, right? And a lot of other folks tend to just focus on the fantasy side of things, but I know when we talk about this every year and kind of peel back the curtain, so to speak, a little bit, when we kind of talk about this as far as how we want these shows to go a little bit, right? Like, we want to dive into some of the IDP side of things and the offensive linemen and really go through some of this as and kind of get a little broader base than just a pure fantasy focus there. So, because some of these guys understanding how that offensive line is going to go, can maybe impact some things like, I don't know, running backs, impact how the quarterback has time, things like that. And so there is a little bit more holistic approach looking at some of these things tonight. And so we'll get into some of the fantasy more relevant areas here in the next 2 weeks. But tonight it's IDP, it's offensive linemen, it is the trenches, so to speak, and a lot of the defensive side of the ball. So should be a lot of fun, should be a good time here. And I think we're going to start with the and I'll kind of throw it up to you. Do we want to start with the IDP or do we want to start with the offensive linemen?
Let's start with the big uglies in the trenches here. Let's go offensive line.
All right, we'll start with the offensive linemen. And before we do, and before we get there, any thoughts on any thoughts out there as far as free agency, some of the signings, some of the things that we've seen transpire over the last couple of days, right? We saw Justin Fields get traded, Mike Williams, no longer a Charger, signing with the Jets. As well as some of the other, signings maybe last week that kind of caught you off guard or really kind of surprised you.
I don't know about surprise necessarily. Mike Williams going to the Jets, I think, gives them. I think Williams is a good number 2 there in New York, and I think it gives Aaron Rodgers a good complementary piece. We've seen Mike Williams pop. With the Chargers, we've also seen him struggle to stay healthy. So maybe a change of scenery will do him well, and see if he can kind of keep up on his feet, if you will. But I do think that will help out the receiving core there for the Jets, because it was definitely lacking a little bit after you kind of get out of Aaron Rodgers and see what they had at quarterback, but also the pass catchers outside of your top options, with it being Breece Hall, obviously at running back, who caught a crap ton of balls, and then Derek, help me out, I'm having a brain fart.
Well, you had Dalvin Cook, you had there as well. You also had Garrett Wilson. Michael Hardman was there for a little bit.
Wilson, that's what I was thinking of, because the Allen Lazard experiment did not go very well. So I thought that was cool. I think the Hollywood Brown signing with the Chiefs is interesting.
Yep.
I think it gives, it's another guy who has deep speed. Obviously trying to find ways to take the top off the defense and get defenses out of this, cover 3, cover 4 shell that they've kind of been throwing at Mahomes and Andy Reid here the last couple seasons. So we're going to see how that works, obviously, with Rashee Rice continuing to develop, hopefully, and kind of be the underneath guy and help do some of that dirty work, being able to find maybe a more reliable pass catcher instead of so many drops that you saw the Chiefs last year. So that was interesting. Um, I don't know if it's too interesting, right? I think a move. Speaking of offensive linemen, since we're getting ready to jump into them, Kevin Zeitler going from Baltimore to Detroit. I think that move just reinforces the prowess of the Lions' offensive line. So I think that's a really good move that people probably aren't talking quite enough about, is what that's going to mean for the offensive line and what their run game and pass game are going to continue to be able to do just by shoring up where they felt like they had a hole.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's a move that is kind of very under the radar from what a lot of folks are looking at there. And Detroit had one of the best lines in the league last year, and somehow seemingly improving that here a bit. So very interesting move there. And you're right, Hollywood Brown to the Chiefs is an interesting move there, right? Because Hollywood Brown has the ability to get behind the defense, even when even when you see him and know that he can take the top off, still has a way to manage to get behind that, and is a receiver that when the ball hits him in the hands, he comes down with it. So, that's definitely a little change of pace there in Kansas City. So, that'll be interesting how that plays out.
Well, here's one that stood out: Jerry Jeudy getting a 3-year contract extension before even playing a snap for the Browns.
But the Browns must have not watched any Denver games over the last 3 or 4 years. So
at least not the ones where he didn't create separation and had a case of the drops.
It's true. That's very true.
We'll see. I mean, I'm sure it'll look interesting, right, with him and Amari Cooper. Like, I like that receiving core. If Nick Chubb's able to come back and obviously the Browns' offensive line was good last year. We expect them to be good again. The defense was better than I think what a lot of people expected. So Cleveland's doing a lot of the right things, but it's going to be interesting. Can Deshaun take another step and return to form, or is he just an average quarterback now? Right? Did that year and a half, 2 years away from the league make him a jag, right? From going from elite quarterback prospect, especially in fantasy circles, to he's just another guy.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, right? Like how that one plays out and how that goes through, but certainly kind of providing a lesson out there for other teams not to provide fully guaranteed contracts. So that'll be interesting to see how that looks and works. And then, it's one of those two that's at this point, it kind of always comes down to where you're looking at it, and just kind of through the free agency moves and how these teams are kind of setting up at this point. I do think that AFC North is going to be the toughest division in football, as the way too early preseason take here. But, that's that. Those teams are tough last year, and they each one of them seemingly got better this year. So,
yeah, they definitely didn't do anything to hurt themselves. I think the biggest, and I understand for cap reasons, but I think the Bengals losing Tyler Boyd, the Bengals releasing Joe Mixon. Like, I don't know if Zach Moss fills Joe Mixon's shoes, but
no, not even close.
I think it stretches he can, right, for a game or two, but for a season, Mixon had been pretty consistent for them, especially the last couple of years. So that one might be a little interesting, but I agree. Like, that division, top to bottom, is probably the most complete division we have in football right now.
Right. Well, and Mixon provides really kind of an underrated pass catcher out of the backfield, right? Like, it was kind of overshadowed for many years with Shamaje sharing that same backfield there, but he's a good catcher of the football out of the backfield, and so it'll be interesting to see how they try and maneuver that one there a little bit. So, but yeah, no, I'm looking forward to being able to watch that division and see that come through there and how that plays out there. But any other thoughts here on the free agency, or any other kind of news wanting to talk about here before we get going with the player profiles?
No, I think that kind of covers it for now.
All righty. Well, let's go ahead and we'll head on over into the the offensive linemen here for some draft prospects, and basically went through. Each one of us took four different guys to take a look at here and do a little bit of a player profile on, and all that kind of good stuff, and where we think that they could potentially go as far as draft positions and all of that good stuff. But why don't you go ahead and kick it off here, and we'll just alternate through this.
All right, so the first guy I'm covering is Amarius Mims, the right tackle out of the University of Georgia, coming in at 6'8", 340 pounds. Currently projected to be kind of a mid-first round draft grade. Could slip into the late first round depending on how many quarterbacks and receivers we see going. But mid-first is great at the moment. A couple things about Mims is he is a great mountain of a man, right? He's big, broad, has very good length for being right tackle, but he's extremely powerful too, right? He's explosive off the ball. He is best in pass protection. His run blocking is good, but it's definitely the area that he needs to improve on the most. But he does he does a really good job. Some things he does need to work on though. He has a bad habit of kind of playing too tall, right? He'll stand up and gets pushed back into the pocket a little bit, which can create problems in the run game. Getting pushed back in the backfield, right? You end up in the running back's lap before he's able to see the hole or make the cut. So that could be a little bit problematic, but nothing that some good coaching shouldn't be able to take care of here for the moment. And then really, with him being so explosive off the ball, it's getting it's getting the right angles on blocks at the second level, right? You get past the defensive lineman, or if you're letting him go on purpose, right? You're giving him the free pass to get up there. It's taking the right angle to allow the extra yardage for your running back instead of just pile driving him into the ground where your running back's right behind you and he needs you to move him left or right to read his cut. And Mims needs to do a little bit better job of that. But overall, really good prospect. Obviously, comes from a good pedigree there at Georgia. Understands complex offensive scheming between Todd Monken and what Mike Bobo were doing here over the last 3 years at school. So, smart kid. I think he'll be a very good right tackle in the NFL. I don't know if he's all pro level, to be completely honest, but I do think he's going to absolutely fill a gap for a team there in the middle of the first round, and be able to anchor the right side of the line for a team here for the next 5, 6, 7 years easily.
Fair enough. I've got J.C. Latham as the tackle out of Alabama, 6'6", he's 342 pounds, and he is a really good run blocker. Like kind of that bulldozer mentality as he gets back there, and can absolutely be that guy that just absolutely just moves guys out of the way for his running back. As far as some opportunities there, side to side, that lateral movement can be at times a bit of an issue as far as getting to the side, setting the block. He's got a real quick first step, and sometimes when moving towards that outside, can get beat on the inside there. So some of those wide pass rush sets and bull rushes can certainly be an area of opportunity for him, but he's got tremendous hands, like super powerful hands, tremendous grip strength, and that can help him with both the run blocking as well as setting some of those blocks out there as well. And this guy is just a prototypical build for the position. He's got great strength, great athleticism. He's a 6'6", 340-pound guy that runs a sub 540 on this thing, so he can get downfield too and get to the second level blocks as well with that run game. And this is a guy that I would see going as a mid first, and I think that he will have a good career here. Certainly one of those that he could certainly kind of anchor a right tackle position for a team for several years.
Very good. Next up on my list, I have Jackson Powers Johnson, the center out of Oregon. He's kind of clearly the top center in the class, really kind of in a tier of his own. if you're looking at it that way. But another guy, he's explosive off the ball, but he's a leader of men, right? He's a good tone setter. People rally around him. Offensive linemen don't get a lot of props for being kind of the leaders and the captains, but the center specifically is kind of that captain of the offensive line, right? He's making those calls, he's making the adjustments. The relationship with him and the quarterback is as tight as any, and he's very good in the run game. So he's able to do all that. Powers Johnson also has he's another guy who has strong hands. He has broad shoulders, so he's able to help stand up against double teams. Right, he's not going to get knocked back all the time. He's able to hold up against those as they're trying to plug up the A gap on him. Uh, One of his downsides is his length. His arms aren't the longest, right? So at times that can be problematic because when he does start to get beat, he gets a little grabby. So if you're able to get a late A gap blitz, especially early on, you're probably going to get some holding penalties just because his arms aren't quite long enough to um, get out there, so he uses his hands to grab. And then he's another guy who at times can stand up a little bit too much, right? So you need him to keep his base because when he gets stood upright, he loses his power and basically just becomes a stalemate. So that's a coaching thing. So overall, I think he's going to be a very good prospect. I wouldn't be surprised if he landed with the Eagles with Jason Kelsey retiring. It kind of seems like a natural pairing here with the late first round grade. It kind of does fit in with where the Eagles are drafting, um, but time will tell. But overall, I think you'll see him go in the first round and help solidify the middle of the offensive line.
I like it. So next guy up, I've got Tyler Guyton, tackle out of Oklahoma, 6'8", 322 pounds. And this is a guy, right? Like, you mentioned previously about guys playing that can play a little too tall. Tyler is a guy that can play a little bit too tall, can get his pads up there a little bit. So there's a little bit of room for that improvement there, a little bit of room for improvement with hand placement when he's blocking and really, keeping those hands inside and at times they can drift to the outside of the uni and outside of the the shoulder pads there. So but he's really good technical blocking when it comes to passing downs, and it can really stay in front of his guy and provide some very good time for the quarterback there. When it comes to run blocking, he there's some room for improvement there. On that is as again, right, he can get a little too tall, play out ahead of his skis there a little bit, but he's a really good pole run blocker, and with that length, he can use that to his advantage to open up running lanes for guys, especially on a pole blocking scheme. I do think that he is going to be a guy that we see maybe sneak up into the first round as a late first rounder, potential second rounder if we don't see him called day one. So I think that we'll see him do well here at the next level. And there's some room for growth, room for improvement, but I think that he'll have a be a solid starter for a team.
Next up, I have Cooper Beebe, the guard out of Kansas State. This guy's going to be, day two guy, mid to late second round. But stands 6'3", 322 pounds. This is not a good guard class overall. So Beebe is actually the highest rated guard in this year's class. So a little bit harder to find good interior lineman, right? Late round first for your top center, and then a mid second to late second for your top guard. So, nevertheless, he does a very good job in the run and pass. Very high football IQ. Definitely has the ability to dominate that first level defender and being able to hold his own against defensive tackles or defensive ends, depending on how everybody's playing. So he will be able to hold his own. He's also agile enough to pull and get to the second level, right? Another guy who's going to be used in pull schemes because he's able to get out wide. but with that, his arms are a little bit shorter, and he will lunge at defenders, right? So if he doesn't get set and he's reaching for guys, it creates a lot of penalties just because his arm length isn't quite there. And then his lateral burst off the line is a little bit too slow. So when he gets hit with delayed blitzes or a speed rush coming in either side, right, the A or B gap. He could be lunging at them, or his feet just aren't fast enough to get to it. So, not without his holes, but another guy, right? You're taking these guys here this early, and you're going to work on the things that you can work on just to get them on the field. So, overall, BB will go day two. I wouldn't be surprised if um, someone like the Raiders, right, looked at that. I wouldn't be overly surprised if he fell to like the Packers as they're trying to continue to build their offensive line around Jordan Love and continue to do strong things there. So some very good landing spots out here for BB. He'll be just fine.
Awesome. Next guy up, I've got Tal Isa Fuaga. Had to look up how to do some of the pronunciations with that one. I think I did all right there, but yeah, offensive tackle out of Oregon State, standing at 6'6", 334 pounds. He's a good run blocker. He can provide a lot of flexibility across the offensive line, right? This is a guy that we could see potentially move into play some of the guard, can play outside at tackle. He's got really good explosiveness off the ball. There's while he's explosive off the ball, there is a little bit of room for growth around some footwork there. But he does maintain a very good leverage, very good frame, super strong frame with this one. Kind of an interesting deal to watch him go through, because there's times where he is super aggressive and at times can be almost a little too aggressive. Getting out ahead of the his skis there a little bit, to the point where may miss some blocks in space there. Because this is a guy that seemingly is looking for the pancake block kind of every time that he gets the opportunity there. So this is a guy that I do think will be a mid first round. Something not going to surprise me if we see him go, kind of in those picks 13 to 18 kind of range here for the first round. So he's a guy that, again, right, he'll be able to provide some flexibility across the line. It may take a little bit of time to see him kind of find his role in the NFL, as teams could potentially kind of move him around to flex and provide that flexibility across the O-line.
And then the last one I have for the offensive lineman is Joe Alt, the tackle out of Notre Dame. Joe is the highest rated tackle in this draft class. Realistically, in most drafts, he'd go top 5. I think this year might be a little bit different between wide receivers and quarterbacks, but he's definitely going top 10. He has a great first step, a very quick first step, and has extremely strong hands. 6'9", 321. So he's able to use that body for everything it's worth. He has very good length as well, super high IQ. So with all that, he's able to handle stunts, speed rushes, and really in the run game, he's probably one of the better left tackles in the run game that we've seen here in the last couple of years. So I think that will serve well as teams are trying to stay balanced a little bit, even though it is a more pass-happy league than what we've ever kind of seen before. Some things that he needs to work on is relying on his length too much instead of using his footwork to get out wide. So at times, right, can get a little grabby because he's reaching for defenders using his length instead of getting his feet to shuffle him over. And then really it's allowing defenders to get into his body a little bit too easily. 6'9", and with his wingspan, he should be able to keep a lot of these defensive end and speed rushers at arm's length, no pun intended, but at arm's length, and kind of keep them away. And too often he allows defenders to get into his body, which can eat him up in the run game a little bit if he's not able to just purely overpower him.
Fair enough. Last guy I've got is Ali Fashanu. He's a 6'6", 312 tackle out of Penn State. He's got elite athleticism. This is a guy that can absolutely combine both power and athleticism, and does so very effectively with it. He's a tremendous both run and pass blocker. Really good hand strength with this thing in most draft classes, right? Like you just mentioned Joe Alt there, but in a lot of draft classes, this is a guy that would easily be a top 10 pick. We may see him slide into the double digit picks here, just with some of the quarterbacks and the wide receivers in here as well. But this is a guy that will do well here at the next level, as a guy that's if really trying to find an area of opportunity. This is a guy that can play a little high at times. Keeps the shoulder, has the pad levels a little bit there, a little bit too high there, and can lose leverage when he's going through there. But this is a guy that possesses kind of several of the skill sets to it and still room to grow. So this is a guy that I think will be able to help anchor an offensive line for years to come for a team that ends up drafting him. Alrighty, well, that's kind of what we've got here on the offensive line. Any thoughts here on anybody? Any notable candidates or anybody else that you wanted to touch on here real quick before we move over to the IDP side of things?
No, offensive line's tough, right? Because these guys, their bodies do change a lot between their college body and what NFL teams have them put on, right? Whether it's just sheer weight, whether it's muscle. Obviously, the coaching at the NFL level is night and day different than what most of these players have ever experienced in college. So I'm sure there's a couple dark horses, right? Where you're able to get a value on a guy and he blossoms into an amazing player. But I think as things stand, these are 8 guys that are gonna have relevance right away, right? All 8 of those guys were in the top 2 rounds. We're not necessarily looking for diamonds in a rough here and trying to make some spectacular call, but it's a name for people to remember, so that way it can jog their memory a little bit as they're coming off the board in day 1, day 2 of how it can help their team.
I like it. Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and head on into the IDPs here, and we'll just kind of keep that ball rolling and have you kick things off here first.
Right. I went a little bit of homework, right? I'm going with Kamari Lassiter as my first IDP, defensive back out of Georgia. 6 foot, 186, thinking mid second round grade. A little bit smaller from what some of these cornerbacks are, but he is very physical despite his smaller frame. So he's not afraid to be outside and try and jam players. He does have a good nose for the football. He can track the ball down very well, and he has very good change of direction. His 3-cone drill was off the charts for the defensive backs. So straight line speed, not quite as fast as what we thought he was going to be. I think he ran a 4.6, I believe it was 4.63. So not quite as fast as I think what maybe he showed on film. But his 3-cone and change of direction was crazy good. I think one of the things that will help him right away is he played a lot of special teams at Georgia. So even if his coverage skills are not quite NFL ready, he'll be in games right away because he is willing to play in special teams and go down and stick his nose in there and help a team out in that direction. So I think that can help him. And then another thing he needs to work on is staying with his assignment in coverage. At times he can get caught peeking into the backfield a little bit, trying to make a play too much, and he'll lose his man in coverage. Especially in man coverages, he's a little bit better in zone where he can sit back and kind of keep receiver and quarterback both in front of him. But in man coverage at times he'll get caught looking and then lose track of his guy, which can create separation in big plays.
I like it. I'm gonna touch on Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama, 6 foot, 189 pounds. This is a guy that has the ability to be a shutdown corner here at the next level. Yeah, he's got great speed. The hips are very fluid. He's got really good explosion off the ball. There's times that he can play a little bit too loose and in coverage, especially in a zone, setting if there's not somebody necessarily in his zone, right? Like, that can be an opportunity, right? Like really understanding kind of where that next play is coming. But again, right, that's a coaching and a scheme type of thing, and that's something that can certainly be improved upon. As far as another potential opportunity there, right? Like opportunity to drop the pads a little bit more and really wrap through the tackle. This is a guy that really kind of looks for the big hit. On that, he can be very physical, can be very aggressive, and at times that can lead to some penalties there. But this is a guy that I do think that he will likely be the first cornerback off of the board again, right, in a different year. This is a guy that we might see sneak up inside of a top 8 pick with the way things are this year. I think that we're going to see this Terrian be in a top 10 or a double digit draft pick scenario here.
Right on. I'm going back to UGA between the hedges here. Javon Bullard is a safety out of Georgia. He's a little bit smaller again, 5'10", 198. So size and some off the field potential concerns have his grade at a late second round. But he is the best man coverage guy in this safety group. So that's definitely a perk that I think teams will find some value out of him once they get him into camp. He has really strong ball skills. He has very high football IQ, played that star position for Georgia that Kirby covets so much for them a lot. Some things that he needs to do a better job of is truly wrapping up. At times he was a little loose on his wrap up and caused for too many ankle tackles or trying to get players by their ankles and then really just working on his durability. He got dinged up quite a bit at Georgia. While he was on the field, he was great, but there were a lot of times where you wanted him to be out there and he just wasn't ready to go or couldn't go. So, work on some durability, work on some tackling, but overall, sitting back at safety and being a ball hawk is what he's good at.
All righty, we're gonna head over to Chop Robinson, the 6'3", 254 edge rusher out of Penn State here, and Chop is a guy that really has a lot of explosiveness and a lot of speed. He can get around blockers in front of him, so a guy that can certainly rock and roll on that side of things, right? He's able to really play with some good leverage and a lot of power through the legs on this one. There's some times that hand fighting may not necessarily be his strong suit there, and a guy that would like to see diversify the rush portfolio a little bit more so, and really relies on just kind of that speed, that display strength and explosiveness to get through this. But got a very kind of powerful frame and has the just a wicked first step to get off the line and get after the pass rush. So this is a guy that I think will do well, and a guy that will likely see a first round his name called on day one.
Absolutely. Moving on, I'm Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. Good size on the kid, 6'3", 247. I think you're going to want him to put on a little bit more weight just to handle the wear and tear of the NFL game, but I think he's got a good base around him. Right now, mid first round grade is kind of where he's at, but he's an incredible athlete. He absolutely tested off the charts at the combine. So that was exciting for a lot of people to see as he kind of blew folks away. But, 4.46 40, his 10-yard split was 1.54, and he had a 40.5 inch vertical. So, I mean, just explosion written all over this kid. So teams are definitely going to be able to utilize that right away. Really, his improvement needs to come in the run game, right? At times, he gets kind of lost in the wash, but he has good outside rushing technique, and he is able to slip through tight spaces, right, where things are kind of mucked up. He was always able to kind of find that hole, shoot the gap, and get after the ball carrier or the quarterback. So overall, great prospect. I think he's going to be able to wreak some havoc here in his first year, and possibly, right? We'll see. Possibly defensive rookie of the year candidate.
I like it. I like it. We're going to go ahead and head on over to Edrin Cooper, who is the 6'2", 230-pound linebacker out of Texas A&M. And this is one in years past. This is a guy that we probably would see his name called much earlier, but as it sits with kind of how the league's moving towards linebackers, this is a guy that we might see sneak into the late first round, guy that we'll probably see called day 2. But he does have, the ability to chase guys down in the open field. So, has that kind of long speed ability there. Plays each down with a lot of just passion. You can see that come out on the field here. Does a really good job of kind of spying quarterbacks and being able to play spy, which, depending upon the conference, there's a lot of these quarterbacks that are mobile quarterbacks, and he can bring the heat when it comes to tackling and finishing the tackle on that one. So this is a guy that has good strength, good size, good strength, long arms, and can certainly do kind of it all in there at the linebacker position. But there is times that he plays with a high center of gravity, and that can allow him to be taken out of the plays a little bit with some of these blocking schemes and how that will come to play there. So I think that's probably the biggest area of improvement is going to be the ability to shed tackles and go through that. But this is a guy that's once a ball tackler gets that, or once the ball carrier gets to the second level, or being able to chase a guy down, this is a guy that's got really good side to side ability, and a guy that can just chase down a runner in the open field.
I like it. And then the last IDP I have is Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State, 6'4", 254, another mid-first round guy. Elite athletic skills, right? He's extremely explosive. He has a great ability to bend and kind of, the flexibility to get around the edge. So can create some havoc there. Ish to Von Miller, right? Not quite the same athlete, but Von Miller was very good at that bending speed rush, right, where he was Gumby like in his prime. So Verse can do kind of the same thing in his own regard. So his tackle rate in the backfield is a little suspect at the moment, right? He needs to make sure he's getting wrapped up and bring guys down. There's too many missed tackles in college, so that'll only be magnified in the pros. So I'm sure coaches will be hammering on that technique, and he can be a little bit of a liability in the run game. It's just like he has mental lapses for some reason. Like he's all about the quarterback. So he's going to have to get a little bit more well-rounded to be able to stay on the field. But coming in mid-first round, he's definitely pass rush specialist is a tag that's going to get thrown at him to start until he's able to fully expand and develop his NFL portfolio. But overall, a good pick. Another guy who could be in the conversation for rookie defensive player of the year here.
Yeah, You got some good ones there. I would love seeing the breakdown there. So my last guy that I've got is Nate Wiggins, the cornerback out of Clemson, 6'1", 173 pounds. And this is a guy that's just got speed for days, right? Blazing speed, ended up clocking a 4.28 40 at the combine here. Has really good height, really good arm length. He's a versatile, kind of rangy type of player with this, and he uses that speed as a really good closing speed as well, right? This is a guy that can also catch guys in the open field and catch up to him. So really good kind of vertical when those vertical routes, those deep routes, being able to close that and contest the catch. So a really good job there. But change of direction can be an issue at times for him. Can rely on that closing speed a little bit too much at times and allow too much space at times there. But overall, this is a guy that has a tremendous ceiling and ability to kind of grow there. This is a guy that I also think will be in that late first to early second type of deal. So guy we may see sneak up into day one, but should be a day two guy at the latest. So Nate Wiggins, I think, is a guy that's you're not necessarily going to be that shutdown corner that you draft right away, but certainly a guy that's year 2, year 3 into the league can certainly grow and develop into a piece for a contending type of team and be a really solid piece on that defensive side of the ball. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the kind of the IDPs there. Any thoughts on any honorable mentions for IDPs that we didn't chat about?
The one that sticks out as I was kind of looking through the list that we didn't talk about was Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And only because of the lineage, right? His dad was a terrific pro. I think he played 12 seasons in the NFL, and really wreaked havoc there in the NFC East for many of those years. So coming out of Clemson, he has the pedigree. Obviously the competitiveness, he's high octane. I've seen some loose comps to Fred Warner, which is always interesting, right? Because Fred Warner is a highly respected linebacker who does all the little things correctly. So you figure with Trotter Jr., with him and his dad basically playing that same position, or at least on the same side of the ball, depending on what part of his dad's career you're talking about. I'm sure there's all sorts of tricks and tutelage and everything else going on there. So that's my honorable mention. But overall, it's a solid class. It's not a great class. It's a solid class. And surely someone from this class is going to kind of jump out as like that tackle monster, right? That IDP scoring monster. But most of those guys don't actually come in the first round, right? Because first round guys are pass rushers. They're, middle linebackers who are sideline to sideline in coverage and that type of thing. So I'm sure we're going to have a tackle monster or two that come out of this class. It just remains to be seen as they get into camp and kind of figure out where they fit in and how teams are going to utilize these guys.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes there, right? And well said on the linebackers anymore. Where most of the time, most of these linebackers, the guys that are truly playing, inside linebackers are guys that we typically see go much later in the draft than the outside linebackers are the guys that can move in and play edge as well. So, it's certainly one of those that the kind of middle linebacker being treated very much like the running back. As far as most teams are kind of seeing that and drafting that these days. So, it should be interesting. It should be a lot of fun to see this one. I'm getting excited here for April 25th when we go live and are dissecting and reacting to each one of these players being drafted and going through that first round there. So, alrighty. Well, any other kind of thoughts here as far as things we want to chat about or talk about before we call it a night?
No, I don't think so. Not tonight. Again, we understand it's kind of slow news cycle. Yes, we're getting some random free agent signings, but for the most part, all these rookies know, right? They're keeping their noses clean, which happened last year too, right? It was a really slow news cycle on the rookies. It's just the typical draft scuttlebutt of, who's going where and who's kind of the riser and faller for the nitpicky reasons that, get leaked and the false, the smoke screens. That's what I'm saying. That's what I want to say. The smoke screens get tossed up, but obviously stay tuned. If anything of relevance pops up, we'll be sure to share with everybody. But hopefully the 16 players covered here this evening are players that you're able to learn a little bit about, right? Take something away, so that way when you do hear their names called, that you have at least a small idea of what they can bring to your team. And then obviously, as we get further along in this process to more uh, fantasy name worthy players. Not that these guys aren't fantasy name worthy, but your standard skilled position players and quarterbacks. Um, it'll be a little bit more relevant for most fans.
True. That's very, very true. But no, it was a you know, good call out there as far as the smoke screens go, because remember at this time last year, listening to some of the chit chat and the talk out there, CJ Stroud was a guy that was just having his draft stock plummet, and as that drew nearer and nearer, that he was, some of the reports out there was that this was a guy that might be the fourth or even fifth quarterback off the board type of thing. And sure enough, number two, and goes out there and has the best rookie season, for sure. So that's one of those
I wonder who had the balls to call that.
that you and I did.
That's right.
Yeah,
We did.
that was weird. So in fact, you and I were the ones pounding the table saying this guy should be number one overall. But they didn't call us up to ask us in any of the war rooms. So had they done that, Carolina might have made a different choice there.
I don't know that his rookie season would have turned out quite the same way in Carolina, and I like where he landed in Houston.
Yes.
The Houston's going to be a fun team to watch here going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that AFC South is going to be fun setting up here as well. So that'll be a lot of fun seeing this season. So, alrighty. Well, next week we're going to be breaking down some more players and rocking and rolling through that. It's going to be a lot of fun there. But yeah, any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
No, thanks for checking out the videos. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate the support, and as always, hit us up on any of our socials at Good Old Boys FF, wherever you consume your social media content. But head on over to YouTube, give us a like and subscribe, and be sure to stay tuned to all the latest and greatest from the boys.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Hopefully we'll see Alex back here next week as we start rock and rolling through more player profiles. And as Kevin said, you can find us on all the socials. Head over to youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, get the notifications for when we go live Tuesday nights here. But that's going to do it for us. Again, he's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.